Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Years. I am your host, Jacob Johnston. So, I have another interview. It's the final interview of my three-part interview series over how you can find and land a career. In this particular show, I am interviewing a college career search expert. For those of you who are either still in high school and you're watching the show, or you're in college or about ready to graduate, this show is for you. This is where I interview a college career search expert to try and figure out how those who don't have experience yet are able to go through and still land the job that they are looking for. Now, yes, there are some limitations. If it is strict that you need 15 years experience and you got zero, that's going to be pretty hard to overcome, but there are ways to be able to get around it if you can show you are exceptionally talented. And so we're going to go through the catch-22 of, you need experience to get the job, but you need the job in order to get the experience, that type of thing. There's a lot of great information that comes out. This is going to be over an hour-long episode for you to watch. If you're watching this on YouNow, of course, you can watch the replay if you're not able to watch it all on YouTube, youtube.com/Hustle Years, Periscope, Hustle Years, and Facebook.com Hustle Years, and you should be able to watch the replay of the video. Because I know that YouNow, there is no replaying the video. Once you're done, you're done. Okay, that's just the way it is. I just wish it could save some of the videos, archive some of it. Anyways, if you are looking to become a guest on the show, let's say you have a success story. You built a business. You are able to land a job and rise up the ladder quickly. You have success with your personal finances, getting out of debt, and building up wealth. Or a great way to manage the balance between your career and your family. Whatever it is, if you're having success in some area of your life, I want to hear from you. We'll schedule a time to get on Skype, do an interview. Just send your request to hypodcast@outlook.com. Yes, I'm using the cheapest possible way in order to do this show and produce it. This is more of my side hustle. This is not necessarily my long-term career. However, if money starts flowing in from doing this, then hey, I'll do it full time and I'll do a lot of interviews. Maybe I'll set up a way for you to be able to, send me tips, send me money, maybe like a PayPal.me or a Patreon account or, something like that. But I'm not doing that yet. I'm just wanting to be able to provide you great information that you can then use to help better improve your life. Okay? So I think I've given enough time now for anybody who is watching or has the ability to watch on any of the platforms that I'm streaming on to be able to come on, get situated. And so now let's go ahead and get into the interview, because that's really what you care about, the information in the interview. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, and welcome to the show, my guest at this time, Kathy Whelan. She is the Business Career Service Director at Iowa State University. And how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Jacob.
Yes, and so before we start diving in too much here, how about you give the audience an overview about you and what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Business Career Services serves the current students of the College of Business as well as graduates, alumni. We work very heavily with employers, both in and out of the state of Iowa as well as around the world. So we have as a primary function to connect students and graduates with companies. My role here is one where I probably work about half with students and about half with companies. which makes it a lot of fun. I'm currently working with the caseload of management information systems as well as supply chain, although I've worked with every single major in the business college at one point or another. So we just have the opportunity to have more staff these days. So the majors are kind of segmented out for each person. So that works very well. But we deliver all of the recruiting, the career fairs, the events related to job seeking for the college, as well as teaching a class in professionalism and careers in business in the business college. And that's kind of a quick once over.
Okay, so you're definitely busy. Makes one wonder if you ever have a home life.
Well, the good thing about this work is that it's very interesting, and the students and graduates are great to work with, as are the companies and organizations. So it's a lot of fun, and we enjoy it. And we do have cycles and some downtime here and there, and that's kind of one of the nice things about university life. But
Okay, and working primarily with students in your role, what would you say would be the number one thing that students can do while they're still, attending classes in college to demonstrate that they have the skills and abilities in addition to the knowledge needed in order to land a well-paid position, which I would define better than minimum wage, or higher up, entry level, 30,000 plus a year
Sure.
job.
So I think one of the challenges for students currently is that companies are really looking for what they consider to be the package deal. So not only do you have to have the academic knowledge, but then you need these other pieces in conjunction with the academic background. So they are expecting candidates to come to them with experience, which can be tough if we haven't had any experience before. They're expecting them to come to them with technical skills. They are also looking for volunteerism or service types of demonstrated skills, as well as then demonstrated leadership. And that really is probably the biggest factor, I think, for students in terms of how they can get started early in gaining experience while they're at Iowa State, is through both service and leadership through organizations.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, when you're going through and talking about it, I know from my experience at Iowa State, there's a lot of student groups and organizations. If one is not able to get into a internship, or the only job that they can find in or around the university is more of the low-skilled position to pay for college, what activities can they do in the student groups to gain the experience that employers will look at and deem valid as demonstrated ability?
So I think that you probably remember, Jacob, that some of the organizations that you were in, you had to spend a good amount of time in those to really work your way up and to gain those really significant student leadership positions, which you were able to do. However, that can be hard for students as well. So something that I recommend to current students is to target some of those small and medium-sized organizations where the ladder might not be so long. And it really doesn't matter that much what it is, but something that interests you, that you can talk about in an interview situation, and where you can go and take actual action to affect change in that organization. So again, the type of role or the type of position isn't as important as, can I say that I did something to contribute to their betterment?
Okay, and yes, I remember at Iowa State, being part of the student government. That was very time consuming, although it did provide a lot of opportunities to take on leadership skills and develop a lot of technical skills as well. And so I know Iowa State has a load of opportunities for students. And what would you say is some of the best practices or the best ways for students to go out, find an open position, and connect with the decision makers that have the abilities to
Well,
hire them.
so much of that happens best in kind of an organic way, right? So places that you can be where, for example, supply chain people hang out, or through professional associations, through charitable organizations, through places where you can do work and connect with others in, again, what I'd call kind of an organic way, which is how you grow relationships. I really think those are absolutely ideal. Now, sometimes you're not going to meet people in the organizations that you need to meet in those places. So how do you handle that? I would say that Career Services is a really good tool. If you have a company that you're interested in and you don't have a contact there, reach out to us. We will be happy to check in with our contacts, see if we can release some contact information or if they can suggest a person in their company. We love serving as a resource in that way. Now, I do see students, and I've had several pretty big success stories this fall specifically. I do see students leveraging LinkedIn very, very well. And I do think that that can be a really nice tool for meeting people in organizations when you don't know of anyone in that particular firm. So that's something else that we're using very heavily.
Okay, and to follow up on that, on building relationships organically and making those contacts, LinkedIn, love it. I believe it is a great resource, as well as, the career service at Iowa State. However, let's say, we get out and, if they've moved away or, or whatever, how would they find events in which these professionals gather together, or what resources would they use to figure out where to go?
I probably am going to go back to the associations on that. So, for example, if we're talking about marketing, there's an AMA chapter in about every mid to large size market, and oftentimes they have events, and they can be fundraisers, or they can be, speed networking or something like that. But I do like those associations very much. For a lot of fresh graduates, I'm personally not eligible anymore, but the young professionals groups are really an outstanding way to meet some people in a community where you may not really know a lot of people. And that is, something that you can use regardless of your discipline or your field or your profession. Now, when we start to work with supply chainers and MIS people, we talk about things such as APICS and ISM and all these, little niche professional groups, but you have to kind of figure out where the people who, if it's digital media or whatever it is, what groups are they in, and then try to find that chapter in whatever location you might be.
Okay, and one group here in Iowa is the Iowa Young Professional Network. I would assume that you would highly recommend them as at least a starting point to find out all the other professional networks out there. Okay, and now we're going to have a little bit of fun. I'm sure you hear all types of stories, on this. So I want to know what have been some of the most creative ways people have gone out, reached out to someone, demonstrated their qualifications, and got a job. Some examples that I've heard going around is some people taking out a Facebook dark post ad and showing up in the newsfeed of the hiring manager, which kind of concerns me now that LinkedIn is starting to do sponsored posts and ads, and so I figure some people might start taking ads on there targeting hiring managers. But I want to hear from you in your experience on what you've seen as some of the creative outside-the-box way of finding and landing a job.
Well, we have certainly had our fair share of some unique approaches and some unique stories. I will say that I'm not a huge supporter of really gimmicky types of approaches. However, we have seen some things that worked. I remember one particular individual who wanted to work for an agency in New York City and was visiting that area and basically made a lunch delivery to the contact person they were trying to reach out to at their office, which was a hot dog with their resume tucked into the side of the little container. And, you know, I think especially in very creative types of careers and professions, I think that can work. And I think this person was able to talk to that manager at a point. I don't believe that he got hired, if I recall, but I think he connection. I had a student who also had written to a potential employer and wrote something to the effect of, I have a feeling you're looking for the best marketing graduate in the Midwest, and guess what? It's your lucky day. You just found him. And again, I didn't love that approach, but I can tell you that he got a call and was flown to the job site and received an offer. And he still talks about how I wasn't sure that was really a very good approach, being too direct. But you know, I think we saw the case of the person who made themselves into a Lego character and then took a YouTube video of themselves and sent that to a hiring manager, which was very unique. And that person got an internship offer. So, you know, I think unique approaches maybe with media, with video, for those creative types of environments can be appropriate. I mean, we're not seeing a lot of that in accounting and, you know, some of our other disciplines, but.
Okay, that's quite a few creative stories there. I can just imagine going or with the guy with the hot dog going, "Ooh, the ketchup covered up the typo." And you brought up a YouTube video with the Lego person, and you know I can see where that only works in creative. But do you see YouTube as being viable? Someone doing, you know, a green screen and giving a professional like presentation and everything, does that work, or was that something that has gone and came and passed already?
There was a trend towards that, and really that was just a couple of years ago in terms of putting forth your video credentials. I think that what happened on that was that many of your hiring managers, and especially those people in human resources, could see how that is fraught with potential discrimination. So I don't think the companies have embraced it enough for candidates to really spend a lot of time on it. Now, we do often talk about a person's online presence, whether it's their web page and they have some type of a portfolio within that web page. And I think some of those approaches can be really good. But that's also giving you more opportunity to make mistakes. So it has to be very clean, you know, highly professional. I had somebody who wanted me to look at his web page, and when I opened it up, there was a picture of him playing a guitar in like a robe or something, and you know. That was very awkward for me. So you have to make sure that every single part of that web presence is really very clean and professional.
Okay, and here's one thing that I'm interested in now that you brought up the web presence, you know, having a website and everything. Does it matter to employers whether you go with the free site that has WordPress.com or to have a paid-for domain of
I do
yourname.com. Does
not
that
believe
make a
that it
difference at
does,
all?
and I am a complete supporter of the free sources. But again, people have to be careful because people can access this information. You have to think about what you're putting forth. There, are you opening yourself up to some type of identity theft? Sometimes people forget about letting lots of information about themselves out on the web and how that could potentially be used by somebody.
Okay. And since we're already diving into this, what are some of the best social media platforms? We already talked about LinkedIn, and we can dive into that a little bit more. But do you see a place in the job search for the other platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus?
Um, I do see opportunity with Twitter, and I think that's primarily from a promotional perspective for companies to promote their opportunities, for students to be following certain firms, and for them to, again, post positions or notices that then link to their web portal. Or I see a lot of opportunity with Twitter for promotion of opportunities. Facebook, I think we've pretty much well defined Facebook now in terms of how it varies from LinkedIn. And I think that folks are primarily using Facebook as their personal social media platform. I'm not seeing a lot of companies doing a lot with Facebook, although they do like to announce events and places where you can engage with them, they may announce there. And we still do use it to some extent, but as far as a place where you're going to find specific job opportunities and network with people in your field, I don't see that as much. Now, you may get referrals from, people that are in your personal network for positions and jobs, but I think that's kind of the still to that personal side, and then you're going to go engage with a company someplace else. Google, I think the jury's still out on that one. So we haven't seen a lot of students adopting that yet, but it's probably just a matter of time.
Okay. And Google Plus, it's one of those, you want to love it, but not enough people, after spending all these years on Facebook, willing to make
Conversion,
the
yeah.
switch there.
But I think
Yeah.
the
And
next thing is right around the corner, though, because we've been pretty static with these set of technologies, for a couple of years now. So the next greatest thing, I think, is probably right there.
okay. And even with Facebook, and I've been kind of debating back and forth on this, taking out a Facebook page as a distribution, as a way of distribution, just like Twitter, of your professional writing and knowledge. Is that valuable activity, or is that just more wasting your time in doing that?
Yeah, we haven't
well?
seen a lot of students and alums doing that or using that technique, so I don't have any direct feedback on that method.
Okay. And I have something that you might be able to look into, see if it's valuable for your students. I came across it. Hootsuite. Uh, what I like about that is not only can you connect and schedule posts there, but you can actually filter your stream and to be able to single out the companies that post hashtag jobs or whatever, so you can get that information faster. Or in the case of LinkedIn, you can pretty much do a complete search for job openings. So I'm not sure if everybody was aware of that,
Yeah,
and just wanted to
I
let that
appreciate that.
be
We
known
need to
as a
look at it
resource.
more from that job seeker standpoint. Our recruiters use it, heavily as ways to, use multiple methods of getting opportunities out there. So how our students can better connect with it is an opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I know it's free to connect to one of each account, and so I just thought, as students being able to see just a stream on all the different platforms
Yep.
of job postings
Seems to have
is a great resource.
advantages. Yeah.
It's amazing what they put out there. And so, what do you see right now as the current state of the job market for recent grads? You know, we hear a lot about how the job market's recovering and everything. And so I wanted to see, you know, with recent grads competing in the job market with people who have been out for a while, what opportunities have been developing, or what do you see as the
Sure.
current state?
Well, given the data that we work with and the measures that we use in terms of comparing and contrasting recruiting years to each other, this is a very, very good recruiting year. The companies are extremely active and posting heavy amounts of opportunity, as well as engaging on campus, coming in, meeting with students, doing all those kinds of things that are, again, some of our measures. Now, something that I would say about the market, though, is that most of the opportunity, or much of the opportunity, requires fairly sophisticated technical skills. And this is where we sometimes see, you know, somewhat of a gap, because you'll hear people talk about, you know, well, we need to create more job opportunities and create more jobs. But I would suggest, based on what we see, that it's really not about more job creation, but more about training individuals to be able to do the technical work that the current opportunities out there require. Because you'll still hear, and this is a conversation I had at 8:30 a.m. this morning about a company trying to identify technical talent and having a lot of difficulty doing that. So I think that's really the message that we have seen and gotten, that the positions that are available are fairly high order. They require, again, fairly strong skills.
Okay, well, I'm glad that the job market is recovering. I know when I graduated in December of 2009, it wasn't.
Your timing was impeccable, Jacob.
Yeah, I believe I took on an extra semester just to, you know,
Let it
delay
pick up a little
time.
bit out there. Yeah, 08 and 09 were our last really, you know, recessionary years that were difficult in job seeking. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, and wasn't too happy looking at my prospects back then.
It
You know,
was
and
an interesting time.
yes, and so one of the mistakes that I made uh, back then in trying to do a job search and try and land a job is, you know, at least I thought I was doing well. You know, I'd be working on it about 40 hours a week. You know, I was on my computer, logged on to Career Builder and Monster and everything. However, I realized that that probably wasn't the best use of my time. So, what do you see in today, you know, the usefulness of job boards, and are job boards, you know, even, you know, worth utilizing when applying to jobs, or are they more of a research and reconnaissance of, you know, the positions you want and what
Sure.
is needed to
Yeah,
qualify?
that's certainly a very good question. I would say to you that one of the most important things for job seekers to do is to assess the very specific results that they are getting from the various tools that they're using. So, you know, if you're using something in particular and it is not garnering results, well, let's stop using that one, right? But I have some tools that people are getting 1 or 2% return rate and continuing to use that tool. Well, you know, for me in my time, you know, I'm looking, you know, for more 15 to 20% return rates. So I want to find tools where I'm getting calls back after the actions that I take by using that method. Now, I think students do still have to apply to job postings on job boards, but that should only be about a third of the time that you spend. The other third is trying to find good companies that can make something happen for you. And then the other third is trying to find good people, which we've already talked about, that work in your field that can make something happen for you. So you're kind of mixing all those methods up. But I can tell you, if you sit down and apply to 100 jobs on one job board, I think the results might be disappointing. So.
Okay, and so now I got to ask you this, since you brought this up. You said, the methods that give you that 20% return. So let me ask you this. What is the secret method that gives you the 20% return?
Well, it's using good methods that work for you and good tools that work for you, and that can be different depending on what individuals need in terms of location and type of position and things like that.
So you're saying that there's no one magic tool that everyone
Correct.
can use and just 20%?
Correct. However, the other part of it too is making sure that you're tailoring your communications. Because I do have students that are trying to approach opportunities in just somewhat of a generic way. And we are talking now about tailored resumes, tailored cover letters. I was recently involved in a search where we had 60 applicants for a position, and literally only 20 of them, 1/3 of them, said anything in their cover letter that related at all to what we'd asked for in the job description. And cover letters haven't died. You might find that to be unfortunate. But the companies are still looking for very tailored communication to the particular role and the skills and the experiences that they have asked for in that description. And I think some candidates are not relating well to the position.
Okay, and I've heard a lot of back and forth on cover letters, some saying employers don't, look at them, waste of time. Others say they're very useful. And then I finally heard one, and I want to get your opinion on this, that, they're still good. The only problem is they're so poorly written that they're just as good as being useless.
I would put it also in that category of another opportunity for you to make mistakes. So, it does have to be done very well. I can tell you that I just looked at 109 cover letters, and really probably 20% were really quality, well-written documents that could convince me to consider that person for an interview. We still, wonder, because nobody wants to read anymore, right? So we keep wondering if and when cover letters are going to die. But I had an alum who called me, and this was probably a year ago, but he said he was asking me about how to handle getting an offer but still waiting back from another company and wanting to hear, et cetera. And I said something to the effect of, well, I'm glad your search is going so well. And he said, well, it wasn't going well until I started writing some halfway decent cover letters. And I really do think it can be a door opener if well done. But yes, you do have the opportunity to hurt yourself there too.
Okay, and then this is where I want to talk about the cover letter and resume. Because what I think part of the problem is that the cover letter just reiterates the resume a lot, so it almost becomes pointless to read it.
Right.
So when you are putting together a cover letter with your resume, then on the resume, how much detail do you want? Do you just want the resume to just be a slight, highlights just enough to pique their interest, and then the cover letter provide the bulk of the detail, or how do you want to go about that?
Yeah, I like to, in my resume, focus on outcomes and results. I'm not going to really do as much with job duties or responsibilities, but more, again, what my significant outcomes have been while I've been in that role. So then in the cover letter, I think what you're trying to do is take a couple of examples. So they have asked for, strong analytical skills. Well, I want to use an example of a time where I've recently used analytical skills to be able to solve some problem or address some task, right? So what I try to do in the cover letter then again is connect to my outcomes and measures that I have on my resume with examples. Does that make sense?
Yes, if I understand you correctly, on the resume side, you don't want to try and fill up every last space on there. You just want to have it nice, neat, provide the outcomes and achievements that
Correct.
you've had in the positions, and then the cover letter tells the story of, one or two, maybe three, to tell the story that relates to the job posting,
Exactly.
but you don't want to put too much information in there because you want to limit the amount of opportunities you have to shoot yourself in the foot.
Sure. And you want to still have, things that you can talk about in the interview situation. But I like to, again, lift up a couple of examples that demonstrate how I achieved those results that I have described in my resume.
Okay. And one last thing on the resume. Objective statements. Maybe this has gone away. Maybe it's still being taught. I know, from high school on, it's always talked about the objective statement of, I want a position that, allows me to use my creativities and demonstrated skills to add value. Something vague that's almost worthless. So maybe I was just doing them wrong, and maybe I didn't have, professionals that really knew what they were talking about. But I didn't get this information from you at Iowa State. I'm talking about high school even. And so I'm wanting to get your opinion on the objective statements. Are they still valuable, or have in my situation, I'm just writing them wrong?
Yeah, I definitely think that we're seeing a trend toward something a little bit different than an objective statement. And certainly for more experienced candidates such as yourself, it is much more common now to see either a professional summary or a skills summary. And I'm starting to lean that way really for undergrads as well. So stating more about what it is that you bring to the table and less about what it is that you're seeking. You know what I mean? Now, I do want students to be able to state succinctly what it is that they're seeking. So I'm afraid that sometimes they avoid the objective statement because they don't know what they're looking for. So they want someone to tell them what they're looking for, and that's not a great approach in job seeking. So it sort of depends on the reason for why we're not using something like that. Now, if you have absolutely no experience whatsoever, I mean, what are you going to write as a professional summary? What are you going to write as a skills summary? And then, an objective might be more appropriate. But I think for those, maybe graduating seniors and certainly those people who've worked professionally, we're leaning more towards those other types of statements.
Okay, and to go along with that, one of the best things I've heard regarding objective statements came from the author John Acuff,
Mm-hmm.
in his book Start, where he pointed out that companies don't hire you to care about what you want to do.
Exactly.
They want to know what you've done and if you can fill their need.
Exactly. That's why I think those types of statements are a better approach. I completely.
Okay. And so, moving a little bit further, say the person has graduated now, all right, and they didn't have that, job lined up. They didn't have the job offer, right out, or maybe they're a little bit older now, and they find themselves unemployed, or they had found themselves underemployed. Maybe a minimum wage job. For some reason, it just didn't take off. Like maybe they graduated in 2008, 2009. And we all know the importance of that first job and where you start, and how fast you can progress, up in your profession. So what can they do if they've been stuck in there, 6 months or a year like that, to get back to showing that they still have the capability, that they can do it, and what they can, whether it's nonprofit, volunteerism, or creative, online activity. What exactly is the best thing for them to do?
Yeah, and that's hard when people are in sort of a stuck spot. That can be very difficult. I think there are ways to kind of create opportunity within your own company, in sort of that same vein of volunteerism outside of the company, and how that might create networks for you, or meeting people, or new opportunities, or additions to your resume. But I would also recommend that an individual volunteer within their company to take on something new, to find areas where they can see opportunity for change or growth, or even if it was something that they had to do by taking on extra hours or what have you, to get yourself out of a stuck space with your manager or your department. Is there something else that you see that you think that you could positively impact? And then pitch that through a proposal to your manager, and how you can still get your job done, but take on another project. I think it's going to be very rare where a manager or an organization just turns you down flat when you have an exciting idea about trying something else that doesn't, require resources probably. But I think that's where you have to become kind of entrepreneurial within your own organization, to try and set yourself apart, or give yourself access to other individuals, or have people see you in a new light, right? But that, again, it can be very difficult, and sometimes it's just, you have to move on from that organization. But I mean, again, a lot of issues. You got bills to pay and whatever else. And if it's not feasible to move on from that organization, then I would be going to, again, volunteer types of activities, nonprofits, community ways that I could network and show my skills through some type of a leadership opportunity within those organizations.
Okay. And, as kind of a, bit of a background, after I graduated, it took me from December to August to land my first job. But the issue with that was that at that same time, I had a child born 3 months premature. And so, no daycare would take them for a while because of the moms and stuff. So, once a daycare, got to the point where they were willing to accept them, I was able to, find something rather quickly, about, 4 weeks. So, and that's kind of, so when I talk about my job searching efforts right out of college, I say I got a great education. It only took me a month, just because I'm not counting that. Just because I'm not.
Yeah, and you know what? It's amazing how many, stories and barriers that people have. And I mean, that's absolutely real life 101.
And so, and I don't count all that time that I was, a stay-at-home dad, even though during nap times I was out there, looking. And one of the things, that I think, helped was the volunteer opportunities. And I like how LinkedIn has updated its profiles more and more over the years. And one of the sections that I notice is the volunteer section, volunteer activities. So, for that person that's unemployed currently, going out and volunteering, listing that on LinkedIn. How much are employers, paying attention to that volunteer section and taking it as skills learned for the job?
I think there's a lot of legitimacy in volunteerism, and I think that it's one of the 5 pieces of the puzzle. But there's 4 other pieces of the puzzle, which is your education and training, your experience, your leadership, and your technical skills. So, you have to try to find a way to put all of those pieces together, and I think that's where candidates can be challenged. But I think volunteerism can help, build into those other areas as well, to help make you more marketable. One thing that I've seen candidates do, that I would try and avoid is using specific dates or even specific months on the resume. I really am a proponent of just using years. And if a company needs to know where you were from this time to this time and this time to this time, they can ask you for an application. But it's not your obligation to put those dates on your resume. And sometimes if you're, then having gaps, you really are calling attention to that by how you have formatted it. So, I would avoid well defining that in your marketing pieces.
Okay. And let's say now, moving on into a different scenario here, someone's looking to make a career change, switching industries and everything. Now, would they go about the same tactics as the underemployed person as far as, the volunteerism or, going online and figuring out different ways to demonstrate their qualifications in the new industry? Or do they have a separate set of challenges or tasks that they need to do in order to make that change?
Well, it is very similar by and large. You do have to do that sort of, lateral thinking about how I look for jobs, more focused on how I go and find people to hang out with that work in this industry, of which I don't have any knowledge. But there is that whole educational piece too, where you're trying to just learn about what is the language of this industry and what words did these people use, and that kind of education is something that you kind of have to take on first before you go out and start trying to network with people that work in that field. And if it's a field that I came up in, that comes to me naturally. But if it's something completely new, then I have to do a fair amount to educate myself just to be able to talk the talk, right? So that is the added layer that can be, modestly difficult, as well as then getting experience in that.
And so with this, this is kind of what I'm getting here, but, a lot of situations is about the contacts that you have, your network, whether that's your network from volunteering or networks at companies or, in the end, the opportunities that you have, whether volunteer, professional, or otherwise, is depending upon your network. And one of the things, of course, that everyone says is the best time to build your network is before you need it. And so,
absolutely,
we're going to dive a little bit deeper into LinkedIn now, because we talked about, in the past that the one issue that we keep coming across is how much opportunity do you want to have to make a mistake? And we know that LinkedIn is for networking. However, networking only works by keeping them warm with interaction. So how do you, use LinkedIn in order to keep your network warm, but limit your chances of mistakes?
Yeah, and there is a lot of talk right now about what kind of consistency is appropriate, and I'm afraid that there's not really a definitive answer to that. However, what we talk with our students about is looking at this in terms of it being mutually beneficial. So, what are you doing to help your contacts? And put that in front of what they're doing to help you, right? So I do think that the people that I see that are the most effective and the most well-polished in this area, they are doing some fairly regular communication, and it's primarily educational. You know what I mean? They're posting stories that they find to be useful. They are messaging, but it has to be pretty tailored again. They're messaging individuals about a story. I had just had somebody who works for a company in Minneapolis send me an article about, new resumes and things like that. But he sent it directly to me, and that helps me to keep him sort of top of mind. But what is consistency? I think you're probably doing something at least monthly. I think weekly, then I start to wonder, well, how much time do you have? And I think that's another concern that people have as well. I see people make some choices that aren't always ones that make me comfortable, about stories that have either a negative tone or ones that have political connotations, or, just ones that are a little bit too assumptive about people's opinions. So I think you have to be pretty careful with what you put out there. It has to be somewhat innocuous if you're especially, posting a story to LinkedIn or something.
Okay, now here's where I have maybe a bit of a conflict. Now, we talk about consistency, and, this is where I like to use Hootsuite, get that scheduled so I can just bulk it. And the reason why I do that, and I think the reason why so many people want to try and put out something weekly or daily or whatever, is because as you do, LinkedIn gives you this information like you increased your visibility 39%. And then when you stop posting, that visibility drops. And so it almost seems like there's a pressure there from LinkedIn to maintain it and to stay on top of that consistency. But to meet LinkedIn's expectations, you're saying that can be a negative to the recruiter. So how do you?
Well, think about the people that you see posting very heavily. Doesn't it kind of cross your mind, how much time do they have to be on LinkedIn? I think there's just it's a little bit double-edged.
I would suspect that a lot of people are using schedulers in order to keep that your profile is raised, 30-some%, and that is just where I think some of that is going. And
well, and of course LinkedIn wants you to post more.
And so, of course, they think if they don't post, they're not going to be seen. And when the recruiters do their search for candidates with such and such skills. And then also LinkedIn has, influencers, and they have their own, instead of putting a post, you can write, a blog post on LinkedIn. How do you see that, from the average, job hunter, and writing those posts versus, the risk of increased opportunities for mistakes?
Yeah. We don't have a lot of our students who are using the blog feature heavily at all. However, I would also say, though, that we are doing a lot of education with students about how to even use LinkedIn. So, the current college student in many cases is not using all features fully, and they're certainly not using the blogging to any great extent. And again, as I've said several times, it's another opportunity to make a mistake. So, if that's a strength for you, and certainly if you're looking for a position in, digital media that requires blogging as a part, you know what I mean? Absolutely. Because that's your strength and a place where you can really demonstrate your skills. But I think for most of our college students, they're not using that feature.
Here's where I get to ask if I've been making a mistake with LinkedIn. With the content being posted, some of the content that I post is videos from YouTube. And there are videos that, from experts. One of the channels in which I will post videos from the most is from Gary Vaynerchuk. I figure he's a multiple-time New York Times best-selling author. He has his own media company and everything. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I question whether or not to post that, because is not necessarily, designed to be professional as it is designed to be engaging with the audience. So I'm trying to figure out, yes, he's considered the leading expert in his field, but yet the video itself may not come off the right way when you first look at it. So is that, good, or should I just stick more to articles?
I think that it does certainly reflect upon an individual as to how they view certain types of material and whether it's posted or not. I think that if that reflects your personality and reflects kind of how you look at the world, and you're comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with that. Now, if somebody might, not, appreciate the sort of not completely stiff approach, then I don't know, is that the right company for you anyway? I mean, I start to think about things like that. So I do suggest that people post things that they are very comfortable with in terms of what they might reflect about you as an individual. And if you're comfortable with it and you think that it demonstrates kind of how you look at the world, then I am too. Because if a recruiter is going to hold that against you, I think that's probably not the right place for you. But that's kind of another way to think about it.
On LinkedIn. If you're sharing articles that you read on your phone, don't assume that the voice-to-text feature works perfectly. Yes, that has caught me a couple of times. Now, one last thing regarding LinkedIn, engaging with your network. You mentioned sending articles and stuff, but LinkedIn also provides you that update of a work anniversary or new job and everything. And when you first click on there, it has pre-filled text, and everything. And so I'm wondering, how much should one be engaging in the work anniversary and new job? If they can't tailor their message, should they stick away with it? Or with the LinkedIn's pre-message format, look good, or just be really frowned upon? I mean, what is the proper interaction?
I really think that it's quite common that people are using the canned version, and that doesn't make me uncomfortable. I will say that I don't engage a lot in feedback about work anniversaries and things such as that, but I do as it relates to new positions and new roles that people have taken, and I don't find that it should have been something more tailored than the standard canned message that LinkedIn puts forth. And I find, you're just updating your network, and you're going to hear from a lot of people when you do that.
Because I was worried about how much time I'd have to spend tailoring a lot of messages. So. Okay, so you don't need to worry about all that personalization. You're just wanting to add value in sharing the information that you learn.
Keep people up to date. Yeah. Now, if somebody writes to me or sends me a message off of that, kind of prepackaged message, I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to thank them, and maybe send them some type of a private message.
So with that, I mean, it's a great way to add value to your network, keeping it warm. You just got to make sure you remember who everybody is. You don't want to send the wrong content.
That can be a challenge. Yeah, that can be. I would also say that we're using the alumni feature very heavily now. And I think that's been another, in conjunction with some of the other features that you mentioned as additions. I think the Find Alumni feature is very useful for fresh college grads as well as experienced job seekers.
That would definitely be helpful because, of course, if someone's graduated from Iowa State, they're going to have a good positive opinion about Iowa State.
They generally do, and they want to try and help students. They want to try and help people from Iowa State. I recently was looking for supply chain contacts in San Antonio and reached out to 3 people down there, and I think I heard from all of them, 2 for sure. I think I heard from all 3 though. And you know, I think people generally do want to help, but I wrote very tailored messages, and that is where you do need to write something tailored. When I reach out to new connections, I am not going to let the canned whatever it says, I'd like to connect with you via LinkedIn.
And there are some features to LinkedIn that came out that I think it's too early to tell whether or not it's going to be useful, such as the portfolio now, where you can put in the slideshow and the videos and everything, and only time will tell whether that's going to be helpful to you or
we will not be
I've been kind of hesitant. I've just put in the education, you know, a picture of the school and then a picture of, you know, GSB, you know, just kind of that. But when it goes down into my actual work history, I've avoided putting those extras in there. And I guess maybe I've taken a little bit of a risk by putting up my disc profile on there. That could, you know, so. Yeah, so I don't know if that will, you know, be signal as a good thing, you know, the confidence there, or if that is just an opportunity for a mistake because I am a very high D and, you know. Well, yeah, and so
well, that's not a bad
find
thing.
out whether or not that will hinder me going forward. Now, and as we start wrapping up here, what have you seen as being the worst advice or worst suggestion that you have seen or heard given to recent college graduates or people who have found themselves in a situation where they need to start looking for another career?
Well, I'm very concerned about how, because of technology, I think that some candidates are mistaken that the job seeking process has now become some type of a passive activity. So if I just post my resume to Indeed, or I post my resume to Monster or wherever, you know, that I can just sit and wait for people to contact me, and that is what I should do. So I think that some people, again, have been given sort of a false understanding of how important really these people and relationship building is, and that is as old as the beginning of time, and it just becomes more and more relevant all the time. So it's really about relationship building, and that is what the basis of job seeking is. So I don't want you to think that it's some kind of, again, a technical thing that happens while I just sit there and wait on my computer, because it doesn't. So I think that advice is about, you know, just relying on job boards and relying on waiting to hear back from submitting to some online portal. Other bad advice. One of the things that I have seen with the set of students that we're working with now is they seem reticent to ask for a position or ask for a job, that is somehow too forward or too aggressive. Again, kind of more to that, you know, kind of a little bit of a passive style of approach. You know, I want job seekers to let the company know they're interested, and I will certainly ask for the job. When I work with people who've had a lot of interviews and haven't been successful, that's usually the first question that I'm going to ask them. You know, are you asking them for the job? And they often look at me with a pretty puzzled look, like, what do you mean? So if people have thought that it's, you know, again, it's too aggressive to tell the company, you know, the more that I've learned today and the more that I know about this particular role, I think I could do very well here, and I hope you'll hire me. I'm extremely interested. You know, I think people are unsure about how direct to be when it comes to asking
Okay,
for a
and
job.
I'll
And to me, I think
and
it's a
as
very
you
direct
may
ask.
know, as a high D, I have no problems going in and taking charge and asking for that job.
You know, yeah,
You know,
never know.
and I think you really nailed something there about, people beginning to think that with technology, that job searching has become a passive activity. I know one of the things I was always told is that job searching is a full-time job. You don't just sit on the computer. So when I have done job searching in the past, I've loaded up my resume and I've hit the street, walking around, just trying to see, what businesses are in the area, the size of them, kind of get the scope, see what, possible positions might be available, just to get an idea of what my options were. And then, of course, I had my resume just in case I accidentally bumped into somebody who looked like they were, important enough to be able to hire me, and so I would be able to strike up that conversation and, go, oh, by the way, here's my resume, and nowadays, I can, skip the printing resume and hand them a business card with a QR code to direct them to my LinkedIn profile. And I don't know, maybe I just like technology. I don't know if the QR codes are actually being used on business cards to direct towards LinkedIn or.
They didn't quite catch on like we thought they were going to, but we still see some of them. And I think there's still opportunity there. We saw at our career fairs for the first time some of the, the tablet stands and companies having candidates stand at their tablet and enter themselves as a candidate for a position while standing there talking career fair. So I still think there's some opportunity. They're scanning information on resumes, taking a picture of that, and immediately loading it to their database. So I'm not sure it's going to be QR codes, but it's going to be continued advancement in kind of immediate gaining of information about
I was really
candidates.
hoping the QR codes, because it just seemed easy to fit all the information right there on your business card, and so.
I think because they can take pictures of your contact information and they need students to become candidates through their applicant system, that I think that as long as they can capture the contact information, that seems to serve the purpose. But
a PDF file, you can convert picture to text, and that helps them be able to scan the information there. And,
exactly.
And I think one trend that might be coming up is more and more companies might start allowing you to apply with your LinkedIn profile versus sending a paper resume. And
yes.
What is the one best action job hunters can take this week to set themselves up for success?
I would say to reach out to somebody that they haven't met before and ask them to meet, go to coffee, take 15 minutes, meet somewhere. Trying to learn from people. Everybody loves to talk about themselves, who they know, what they know. And anytime somebody would ask me about my profession, can I talk to you for, 15, 20 minutes about how you got to be doing what it is that you do now? I mean, I love that. Absolutely love that. I would never turn somebody down. So I think the one action that a job seeker who's either trying to change their situation or trying to get a position is to reach out to somebody who's doing a job that interests you and ask them if they'll spend 15 minutes with you.
What books or resources would you recommend for those currently looking for a job?
Well, probably the one, and it's not really a book per se. I mean, it is a book, but something that I think that I've seen candidates struggle with is identifying what their strengths are. So I am using StrengthsQuest and StrengthsFinder very heavily, and if your viewers haven't explored Strengths, I really think it is extremely useful for helping you gain language to use in an interviewing situation about how you can sell yourself. So I'm not sure if you've taken StrengthsQuest yet or not, Jacob, but it's a very interesting way to think about working with people, and really the gist of it is that let's stop trying to correct individuals' deficits or their weaknesses, and let's focus on playing to the strengths of each of the people on our teams. And it really helps students be able to articulate what they're really good at too. So you'll have to check it out. It's a Gallup product. But that's a really good one. I guess I'm personally doing some stuff on gender issues in job seeking and things like that. So I'm working with Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book and a few other specific gender issues in job seeking.
And
but that's just
what is the as we wrap up here, what is the best way for those who have listened and watched this interview to reach out and connect with you?
Sure. Email's always a winner. I'm still a big email user. wielandk@iastate.edu. I am very heavily involved in LinkedIn, although I really haven't been engaged in job seeking for a long time, so my profile isn't exactly complete. But I do spend a chunk of time every day on LinkedIn, so I'm happy to take LinkedIn requests, and that would be another.
Well, I'd like to
really
thank you for coming on to the show and talking with me. A lot of great information was provided, and so again, thank you, and the audience will see you on the flip side.
Wow, that was a great episode here. I hope you've gotten a lot of actionable information out of the last 3 episodes, and that you're able to translate that into success in your career. You know, again, I know if you're an entrepreneur, you probably don't find this too actionable, but hey, unless you have a large store of cash in order to launch your career, you probably need some way to fund the equipment, software, or getting the product. So being able to do this in order to get the cash flow for your initial launch is important. I mean, not everyone can count on Kickstarter, right? And throughout all of this, don't just take information for information's sake. If you are finding this content interesting and you're going through and you're going, hey, that actually sounds like a good idea, and you're looking for a job, then do it. You know, whether it's the guerrilla marketing, whether it's from Rick Gillis, you know, and resume writing, or whether it's, you know, from this interview on how to be able to land that job out of college, you need to be able to take this information, make it actionable, and launch it or use it to make yourself successful so that you can get out of debt. You can build wealth so that at retirement you're not waiting on the government to take care of you, because we all know they can't handle money worth a squat. You know, I wanted to say something else, but, you know, I got to keep this nice and friendly. You know, I don't want to have to worry about upsetting the platform, you know, and social media gods, right? And so, if you like this information, if you've gotten a lot out of this and you haven't done so already, hit subscribe, click fan, share this around with other people that may be struggling. You know, use this information to help as many people as possible. All right? So I'd like to thank you so much for your time and attention. It's been very much appreciated. I will be back again soon, and I hope to hear from you. And, you know, and you're emailing me of your success stories so that we can go ahead, set up a time on Skype, and get the information out. Again, to get on the show, send an email with a brief summary of what you want to talk about to hypodcast@outlook.com. Thank you for your attention. I'll be back again soon.